What's up, guys? We're back for another episode of the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast. We're on our 5th episode. It's been going well. I've been having a lot of feedback from you guys saying you've been enjoying it. So I appreciate all the listens, all the downloads, and all the feedback. If you do have any feedback for me, you can always hit me up on social media. I'm super accessible. Twitter at Lucrative MMA, Instagram at Lucrative MMA. And you can check out my website, lucrativemmabetting.com, where I have packages and also have contact forms on there if you want to contact me. So for those of you who are new listeners, I'll just break down exactly what we're going to do in this podcast. I'll be talking about UFC 260. And of course, we have the rematch of Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic. It's a fight that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. And we will break that fight down. We'll talk about it from a betting angle, and also talk about my prediction, basically, what I think is going to happen. So like every podcast, we talk about the most exciting fight. We also talk about the most inaccurate betting line on the card, because this is a betting podcast. This isn't just an MMA podcast. This is an MMA betting podcast. So I love MMA, but what I love more than just watching MMA is making money on MMA, right? And I've been able to do that for many years now. I'm third-party tracked on betmma.tips. So all of my previous bets are on there. All of my record is on there. I'm highly profitable in the last 2 years. So we will be talking about the most inaccurate betting line on the card to try and help you make some money. And we'll also be talking about the most exciting fight on the card, just for some pure entertainment. Not from a betting angle, but of course, I will go over the most exciting fight on the card from a betting angle, or what I perceive to be the most exciting fight, right? Everyone's probably got a different opinion of that. But I believe this week, everyone's opinion will probably be the same as mine, as opposed to the main event. So obviously the main event's probably the most exciting fight on the card, right? But because I'm going to talk about the main event anyway, and I always do every week on this podcast, I'm actually going to be choosing another fight as the most exciting fight. So we'll get straight into it. And that's exactly what I'll start off with. I'll start off with the most exciting fight on the card. And that is, can anyone guess? It's the Thomas Almeida versus Sean O'Malley fight. Okay, this fight is going to be an absolute banger, a bantamweight showdown. It's the return of Sean O'Malley. And, that's what it's being billed as, right? The return of Sean O'Malley. But I don't really know why. I mean, he fought not too long ago, right? That Cheeto fight wasn't like ridiculously long ago. I'm not sure exactly when that fight was, but maybe like 6 or 7 months ago. So it's not necessarily the return of Sean O'Malley. It's just his next fight, But obviously the UFC hype machine wants to continue to hype Sean O'Malley. So that is what they're billing it as, the return of him. And he's fighting Thomas Almeida, who recently returned after a long layoff against Jonathan Martinez. And when I say recently, it wasn't too recently, right? That was probably about a year ago, that fight now, or maybe about 9 months or something. And we've got Tapology here, so we can check his record. But Thomas Almeida came back against Jonathan Martinez, and he put up a decent showing. I know a lot of people are talking about he got completely dominated in that fight. And there is a narrative going around that, he was just completely blown out of the water. Definitely give Jonathan Martinez the win there, of course. But Thomas Almeida put up a decent showing. And when I was researching this fight the other day, I actually give more credence now to Thomas Almeida's skills and just his performance in that fight, because he did put up a better performance than I thought he did when I originally watched the fight, when I watched it live. So Thomas Almeida is a good fighter, man. Brazilian fighter. He's got a 22-4 record, which is a solid record. He fought Jonathan Martinez in October of 2020, so not that long ago. That was only, that was about 5 months ago now. So, he's making a quick-ish return. As I said, before that, he had a long layoff, almost 2 years. Just a bit longer than 2 years, actually. Almost 3 years. When he fought Rob Font, and he got knocked out by Rob Font there, but not too much shame in that, I guess. He did lose to Jimmy Rivera before that. But before that, other than the Cody Garbrandt fight where he got knocked out, he was undefeated. And he's got a lot of wins on his record here. And actually, when he went into that Cody Garbrandt fight, I don't know if some of you will remember, but it was way back in 2016 now. But Cody Garbrandt was 8-0. He was undefeated. Thomas Almeida was 21-0. He was undefeated. And there was a lot of hype around that fight. They basically were billing that fight as the next champion. So whoever wins this fight was going to be the next champion. And to be honest, the UFC were right there, you know. The hype machine was right because Cody Garbrandt knocked out Thomas Almeida in under 3 minutes. And he went on to become champion, of course, having the display of his life against Dominic Cruz. And the UFC were right there. After that, Thomas Almeida returned later on in that year. He got a good win over Albert Morales. He finished him in the second round. But then he went on a skid. He lost to Jimmy Rivera. Then he lost to Rob Font. And then he had a huge layoff, came back and lost to Jonathan Martinez, right? But as I say, he didn't look bad in that Jonathan Martinez fight. Look, all of his Thomas Almeida's fights are exciting. You won't get a boring Thomas Almeida fight, right? It just doesn't exist. And then on the flip side, you've got Sean O'Malley. You won't get a boring Sean O'Malley fight, really. It doesn't exist, you know? Even when he hurt his leg against Andrei Sukumtov and he had to spend the whole third round on the ground, that was still a pretty exciting fight. So Sean O'Malley only fights one way, exciting, comes out to bang, comes out to finish. Thomas Almeida only fights out one way, comes out to bang, comes out to finish. So it's no surprise here that I'm choosing this as the most exciting fight on the card, right? But what I will say in regards to there being a surprise is that when I saw the betting odds for this, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit shocked. So if we just bring up the betting odds, the current betting odds right now, and they haven't really changed since the opener, I don't think, but we will check that by going on bestfightodds.com. And if any of you don't know bestfightodds.com, make sure you check that website out. It's a very easy way of checking multiple bookmakers' lines on all of the fights on upcoming cards. And you can also check the line movement and all the prop line movement as well. So Sean O'Malley is currently about a minus 330 favorite, depending on where you shop. The best price you can get him is minus 305 at DraftKings Sportsbook, it looks like. And Thomas Almeida is about a plus 250, depending on where you shop. The best price you can get him is a plus 270 on Bet Online. And if we check the line movement here, we can see exactly where the bookmakers lined this when they first opened it, right? So when these odds were released on February the 3rd, Sean O'Malley was lined by the bookmakers as a minus 250 favorite, right? Within a day, he got bet down, which always happens, right? As soon as the lines come out, punters go and bet them early lines straight away. The limits are obviously very low on them lines, so you can't get too much money down. If you're talking big money, you can't get big money down. But, you know, it's still good to take advantage of because sometimes the bookmakers line fights pretty crazy. Where they lined it originally, I probably agree with that, which was minus 250, right? Which is about a 73% implied probability of Sean O'Malley winning. But as I said, within a day, that was bet down to minus 325 the next day, February the 4th. And since February the 4th, all the way up until today when I'm recording this, March the 24th, so, you know, almost 2 months there, it stayed exactly the same, really. There hasn't really been much line movement on that. And as I say, I think the line is a little bit off now. O'Malley's probably too much of a favorite, just because we still have questions about O'Malley's durability in his legs. We obviously have a little bit of question about his mindset, his mentality, how he's going to come back from being knocked out by Chito Vera. Obviously, that fight wasn't, you know, a beatdown and he got knocked out, but he did get virtually put unconscious by them elbows. I do think he was still conscious, but, you know, it's that type of consciousness where you're definitely not fully conscious, but you're not fully unconscious either. But look, them elbows hit hard and it was a good stoppage by the referee, in my opinion. I did have someone say to me the other day that it was a bad stoppage. And like, I understand because it was quite quick. You know, he landed 2 elbows and he stopped it. But I completely agree with the stoppage. The referee is there to protect the fighters. And Sean O'Malley at that point was almost unconscious. He was not protecting himself. So it's a very good stoppage, in my opinion. And you couple that in with Sean's legs being completely dead. He couldn't stand up. Very good stoppage. Anyway, minus 250, where it was lined originally by the bookmakers. I think the bookmakers got that right. Minus 320 now. I mean, it's a bit too much. You know, I can't really get behind the bet on Sean O'Malley. You know, if you're lining at a minus 330 or minus 340, wherever he is now, around about that range, depending on where you bet. You're basically telling me that Sean O'Malley's got like a 77, 78% chance of winning this fight, right? And I don't know if we can say he's got that much of a chance of winning this fight. I don't know whether you can justify saying that 78 of these times, I don't know whether you can justify saying that if these guys fight 100 times, then 78 times Sean wins, damn near 80 times. So Thomas only wins 20 times. I mean, we don't know that. We don't know how durable Sean O'Malley's legs are. And the reason I'm saying that is because there's been 2 times now in his 5 UFC fights or whatever it is. There's been 2 times where he's been rendered unable to fight because of leg kicks, So that's like 30-40% of his fights that he's ever had in the UFC. He hasn't been able to walk, right? First round against Cheeto, he couldn't stand up. The third round against Sukumtaf, he couldn't stand up. And if Sukumtaf was a bit clever and didn't jump into his guard when Sean couldn't even stand up, if he just made Sean stand up, Sean wouldn't have been able to. The fight would have been called off, and Sean would have lost his undefeated record before that. So we don't know the durability of Sean's legs. What if Thomas Almeida comes out here, peppers the legs, and Sean's legs just go dead again? Like, it could definitely happen, right? It definitely could. So I don't think you can say that 80% of the time that doesn't happen just because we don't know yet. So there's too many unknowns for me to get behind a bet on Sean at that price. And what I always say is that sports betting, right, for us, our job is basically to make assumptions, right? That's what we're doing at the end of the day. We're making a guess on who's going to win a fight. To make that guess, you have to assume things, right? To assume things, it means you're making assumptions. But what I always say is that we want to try and make the least amount of assumptions as we can when we're betting on sports, right? So we're always going to have to assume. That's our job. But we want to assume as little as possible, right? And we have to make a big assumption here, in my opinion, to say Sean's legs are going to be able to hold up, because we've already seen them not hold up twice. So for that reason alone, I don't think you can say 80% of the time Sean's legs hold up. I think that's too much of an assumption. For me personally anyway, that's too big of an assumption, and I'm not going to be betting Sean at that price. Now, in regards to Thomas Almeida, is there any value on Thomas Almeida at plus 250? Now, that question is a little bit more tricky for me. So plus 250 is an implied has an implied probability of about 29%, right? So can we say that, Thomas Almeida is going to win this fight more than 30% of the time? Again, I don't really think we can. I do believe Sean's skills are, well, at least they look to be a level above Thomas Almeida. Now, Thomas Almeida can bang. He definitely can. But, we've seen him beat quite a few times in the UFC now. 4 times, to be exact. He's lost his last 3. He had a huge layoff, came back, looked okay against Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez is a good fighter, but we did just see Jonathan Martinez get knocked out by Martin Day there. So, the loss, I should say, on Almeida's side against Martinez hasn't aged particularly well. But obviously, we can't take too much away from Jonathan Martinez just from getting knocked out by Martin Day. It is what it is. But Thomas Almeida's lost many times in the UFC, and Sean O'Malley looks to have a huge speed advantage here. And he just looks to be a level above in the striking, in my opinion. We've seen Sean put people's lights out before. We know he's got power, and we know he's got timing, and we know he's got precision, right? He's a very athletic dude. He'll spinning back kick to the body. He'll throw spinning head kicks. He'll throw that Mealu, which is a capoeira strike. We've seen him get knockouts on the regional scene where he follows up overhand right combos with spinning back kicks to the head and knocks people out. That's how he went viral. He got a very good knockout in the Contender Series where he does that slip and bang, but it's not quite a regular slip and bang because he doesn't slip his whole body back. He kind of just moves his head back and comes back with the overhand. When most people slip and bang, they kind of move at least the upper half of their body. But when Sean does it, he kind of only moves his head and comes back. So it's very, it's high level, right? It's high level. We know Sean's a high level striker. I don't think no one's doubting that, right? So I do think he's a level above Thomas Almeida in the striking. And then that begs the question, this is not a striking fight, right? This is an MMA match. But Thomas Almeida he just doesn't take people down, right? I don't have his record up here, UFC stats, but he just doesn't take people down, Thomas Almeida. So if I could be confident Thomas Almeida will come and try and push the grappling out here, I might be able to talk myself into betting on him, giving him a better chance than 30% to win this fight. But I think the line is damn near accurate on the Thomas Almeida side. And as I say, maybe you should make Sean O'Malley like a minus 250 or something. But I don't see any edge on either side of the line enough to be betting it. So I'm going to take a pass on this. Now, where can you find value on this fight? Because obviously we're MMA bettors. We want to be, I always talk about being a good all-round bettor, right? We don't want to just be able to bet only on money lines. We don't want to be only able to bet parlays, with juice favorites. We don't want to be only able to bet prop bets. We want to be able to bet everything, right? So when I'm breaking down a fight, I'll look at the money lines initially. Always straight first look at the money line, right? And unfortunately, because the money lines are, where you can get the most money down on, and they're the easiest to cap, right? Because it's much harder to say how much percent as a fighter to win in round 3, which is a prop bet, as opposed to how much percent has a fighter got to win, right? It's much harder to cap that. So the money lines, most of the time, or all the time, I should say, really, are always the most accurate lines when you're looking at MMA betting, right? And it's probably the same in every other sport as well. But I can't talk on them sports because I don't know. But the money lines are always the most accurate, right? So you should always look at the money lines first, because there are some inaccurate money lines, and we actually will touch on one later when I talk about the most inaccurate line on the card. But now, after we say that there's no value or there is value on the money lines, then you delve into the prop bets and you see if you can find any value on the prop bets. So I'll just bring up the prop bets here and I'll see if there's any value on them. So I've got Sean O'Malley versus Thomas Almeida. Now, the bookies have set the totals, which is the over-unders, which is how many rounds it's going to go. They've set it at over-under 1.5 rounds. Now, it's pretty interesting for me because the bantamweight fight, most of the time, these over-unders will not be set at 1.5 for a bantamweight fight, although a lot of bantamweight fights do finish inside the distance. Over 1.5 in a bantamweight fight is it's not usual to see, right? Over 1.5 in most fights is not usual to see. So we've got over 1.5 rounds sitting at about minus 135, depending on what bookie you bet on. If you want to bet these fighters to go under 1.5 rounds, so you're betting on pure violence in that first round or in the first 7.5 minutes, then you can get a plus number, but nothing much. You can get like plus 105, plus 100, even money, plus 110. So the bookies are favoring it to go over 1.5 rounds, but not by much, The bookies are basically saying that they don't really know. They're basically giving the under 1.5 rounds about a 53% chance of happening, and then they're giving the over 1.5 rounds. Sorry, they're giving the over 1.5 rounds about a 54% chance of happening, and the under 1.5 rounds they're giving like a 48% chance of happening. So they're basically saying almost 50-50, right? They don't know, and I don't know either, guys, to be honest. I don't know whether this is going to go over 1.5 rounds. I don't know whether this is going to go under 1.5 rounds. I really can see both happening. Sean O'Malley starts early. He likes to get first-round finishes. He's got a lot of first-round finishes. We look at his record here. His last fight against Chito Vera, he got stopped in round 1. The 2 fights before that, he won in round 1 against Eddie Wineland and Jose Quinones. The fight before that, he went to decision against Andrei Sukumtov, and he went to decision against Terry and Ware as well in the Ultimate Fighter finale. But before that, he's got all finishes, and out of the 7 finishes he had before that, 6 of them was in round 1. So, the guy starts quickly, right? And he gets finished in round 1, like his last fight, or he finishes you in round 1. So you would like to think this fight's probably going to go under 1.5, but because they are so, or they're on a higher level, it's hard to predict these things, They're tough guys, maybe. We know Almeida's pretty tough. We saw him take some heavy punishment against Jonathan Martinez in their last fight. And we don't really know if Sean O'Malley's tough, right? Because his fighting style means that he doesn't really get hit a lot, right? And when we have seen him hit, which was really only in the Chito fight, as far as I can remember, like actually take severe punishment, which was to the leg, he wilted and got stopped, And I'm not going to take too much away from Sean because he couldn't control it, right? He rolled his legs so many times because he just couldn't put any weight down on it. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna take too much away from Sean about that loss, but this fight is gonna be real interesting to me. I do see a finish in this fight, but I can't confidently bet on the over or under 1.5 rounds. So in that regard, there's not much value. O'Malley by TKO at plus 150. I think if you're going to bet on this fight, that's a decent bet. I think if any bet you're going to have, that probably would be the bet I am betting. I'm sorry, I think I might have cut off there. My internet cut off, so I hope I'm back now. And you can hit me up in the chat and let me know if I am back. But yeah, so, there's not much value on this is basically what I'm saying, guys. I don't see too much value here. If you are going to take a poke here, maybe take a poke that O'Malley wins by TKO KO. If you think Sean's durability is not going to be there, which is it's a high question for me, you can take a shot on Almeida wins by TKO KO at plus 500. I think that's not a bad shot, No other bookies have released that yet, but when they do, you might even be able to get a better line, pardon me, than plus 500. But I would say that probably will be the best line. I don't see it getting above that. Almeida wins inside the distance on a lot of other bookies at plus 350, plus 450. So you'd think the TKO KO will stay at about plus 500. So, that's not a bad shot. If you think that he can leg kick Sean, maybe Sean's leg will go. I don't hate a bet on that at all, to be honest, because you're betting on something that has happened before, which I always like to do. I don't really like to bet on things that I haven't seen happen before. So I don't like to bet on a fighter to knock someone out if I've never seen that fighter get knocked out before, because it goes back to my earlier point. There's more assumptions that you have to make, and you want to make as little assumptions as possible. So look, I am going to take Sean O'Malley for the win in this fight. As I said, there's no value on the betting line for me, and I treat sports betting as investing, right? Investing my money in the stock market or something like that, investing my money in stocks, in commodities. So even though I pick Sean O'Malley to win, I'm not going to invest my money in him because I don't think I'm getting a good enough number. And at the end of the day, we have to bet numbers, not fighters. So I'm going to take O'Malley for the win. I'm going to say he gets a first round TKO as my final prediction, but no value in the line, and we move on. The next fight, I believe there is some value in the line, and that's why it's the most inaccurate betting line on the card for me. Now, I do want to preface this section or this segment of the podcast by saying that UFC 260 is probably one of the hardest cards to bet on I have seen in a long, long time. And I don't usually say that because, as I said earlier, I class myself as a all-round MMA bettor, right? So a lot of people are very good at parlays. A lot of people are very good at prop bets. A lot of people are very good at money lines. And I class myself as being good at all of them, right? I maybe don't excel in any specific one of them, but I believe I'm good at all of them. So I'm a good all-round bettor. So sometimes my money lines are smashing it. This year, my straight picks have been earning me the most profit by far. Last year, my props and parlays were earning me the most money by far, more than money lines. So I think I'm a good all-round bettor. And so that for that reason, you don't usually hear me saying this is a shit card for betting, because you hear that every week, or every other week, people are like, oh, this card's not very good for betting, right? But in my opinion, a lot of times that's because the people saying that are not great all-round bettors. They might be good at prop bets, and that week the prop bets are not very good. Or they might be good at money line bets, and that week the money lines are not very good. But because I class myself as a good all-round bettor, I don't often say that this card is shit for bets because I bet all round. So I've got multiple choices of bets to bet on, right? But I will say for this week, UFC 260, it's a hard card to bet on, right? And if it's a hard card to bet on, and if you're feeling that too, don't force any bets. You don't need to. You can take a week off, You don't have to bet. I know you want some action when you're watching the UFC, but everyone's different, right? I'm in this game, in this betting game, to make money, to make legitimate money. And I have made it for many years now, and I will continue to make it, and even more for many years to come, right? Some people just want to have a little bet for fun, and that's completely fine with you. that's up to you. Put your money on. But if you want to make real money and grow your bankroll consistently and, actually be a disciplined sports bettor, then what you have to do sometimes is completely pass, right? Like I just did on the Sean O'Malley versus Thomas Almeida fight. I passed on that fight, right? Because I didn't see any value in the line. If you don't see value in the whole card, just don't bet it, man. Now, is there any value on this card? I do think there is value on one money line bet. And actually, you won't see this up here now because the fight was rumored to be pulled from the card. And the fight is, which is the most inaccurate betting line on the card, in my opinion, is Shane Young versus Omar Morales. Now, I'll just bring up their record here on Tapology. And, we'll talk a little bit about why this fight is possibly cancelled, right? I don't know if it is cancelled. If anyone has better information than me, please hit me up in the chat or please let me know. But this fight was rumored to be cancelled because Shane Young trains sometimes with Alexander Volkanovski. And obviously, as you all know, Alexander Volkanovski tested positive for COVID-19 and was actually pulled off this UFC 260 card where he was slated to defend his featherweight title against Brian Ortega. Because he tested positive for COVID-19, everyone then thought Shane Young would be pulled off the card, right? But apparently he's not pulled off the card. So it was released on Twitter, or the news broke by a few people on Twitter that he was pulled off the card. But then it came out the next day that actually he might not be pulled off the card and maybe he can still fight if he doesn't breach COVID protocols. So right now, it looks like he's still on the card, but there is still a lot of question about that. Bloody Elbow put out a report earlier saying he's off the card. But when I read into that report, they was actually quoting the article or the tweet that was put out by an MMA reporter a day prior saying Shane's off the card, right? So they was quoting that tweet. But on that guy's Twitter, he actually said that, oh no, this original tweet was wrong. He is still on the card. So they hadn't obviously updated themselves. And they still put out the article saying Shane's off the card, even though it had been corrected that he's on the card before they put the article out. So they just didn't do their due diligence there. And it is what it is. So I don't really know where we are, right? It's back and forth. But because I don't know, because at the moment it's still on the card, I'm just going to break the fight down, right? And the reason I think is the most, inaccurate betting line on the card is firstly because there's not many inaccurate lines. But also because I do think it's pretty inaccurate. So we can't see it here, but because Best Fight Odds have took it down because, apparently this fight was meant to be cancelled. So you can't actually bet on this fight at the moment on most sports books. But if the fight isn't cancelled, all the sports books in due time, either today or tomorrow, will put this fight back up. So Omar Morales was a minus 175 favorite throughout virtually all bookies. And Shane Young was like a plus 135 underdog, right? And I just feel like that Omar Morales should be at least a minus 233 favorite here, right? And you're going to ask, why do you keep saying minus 233? Well, minus 233 has an implied probability of implied win probability of 70%, right? And I think you have to give Omar at least a 70% chance of winning this fight, right? So, and the reason why is because if you break the stylistics down of these two fighters, they're two strikers. Simply put, they're two strikers, right? Shane Young, I have seen him get a takedown before, but it's very rare. He doesn't get a lot of takedowns. That's not his style. He likes to push the pace. He likes to get in your face. He likes to throw out a lot of volume. He's training at City Kickboxing. I mean, the clue's in the name, City Kickboxing in Auckland, where I live. He trains with Brad Riddell, who you guys will know. He's a great kickboxer, and now MMA fighter. He trains with Israel Adesanya, great kickboxer, now MMA fighter. They've got Carlos Ulberg in there, who's a kickboxer, now MMA fighter. So they've got a big kickboxing element in City Kickboxing, would you believe it? And most of his fights, Shane comes out and tries to kickbox. Now, the reason why I think this betting line's off, because if he does try and kickbox with Omar Morales, I favor Omar Morales as just a level above Shane Young in the kickboxing. Now, I do like Shane Young. I think he's a good fighter. But when it comes to betting, I just believe that Omar Morales has the tools to beat Shane Young here and actually possibly get a stoppage on Shane Young. Shane Young is notoriously tough, but he did get knocked out in his last fight by Ludovic Klein. Now, that knockout was pretty brutal. It was a head kick, and then Ludovic Klein came with the uppercuts, I believe. And I believe Omar can do the same in regards to possibly getting a KO win over Shane Young here. Omar has very good striking. We've seen Omar go toe-to-toe with Gabriel Benitez, who I rate pretty highly as a striker. We did see Omar Morales get pieced up and dropped a couple of times in his last fight against Giga Chikadze. But Giga Chikadze is a very high-level striker, right? He's a very high-level kickboxer, even before he came to the UFC. And the difference between Giga Chikadze and Shane Young is, well, there's many differences in regards to styles and, what level they're on, like what level of striker they are. But the biggest difference I saw was the range that they fight at. So Shane Young likes to come close and, clash with you in the pocket a bit more than Giga Chikadze, who likes to stay on the outside, hit you with them kicks, and come fire laser straight hands. He's got a lot of reach, Giga does, right? So Shane Young's not going to be fighting that game with Omar Morales, right? He's going to be crashing in the pocket with Omar Morales. And we saw Omar can go in the pocket, man. I've seen Omar go in the pocket and, a number of times. And the only times Omar really had success against Giga was when he was able to close in the pocket. So Shane's going to give him the fight he wants here. And Omar's probably going to give Shane the fight he wants, So if this wasn't the most inaccurate line for me, this probably would have been the most exciting fight on the card, if I didn't have Sean O'Malley and Almeida to talk about, of course, because I think this fight is going to be an absolute banger. But when they do come close in that, center of the octagon, when they clash, I just believe Omar's got a bit more power. I believe he's a bit faster. I believe he's a bit more technical. I kind of give him the edge in the striking in almost every facet, in my opinion. You maybe could give Shane Young a bit of the edge in the volume, but I think that this is going to really dissipate when you've got someone like Omar Morales hitting you very hard and also being able to get out of the way of some shots as well. And Omar is very stubborn. If he gets hit, he will want to hit you back, right? We've seen it in a number of his fights. So if Shane Young, isn't careful, I think Omar could really put it on him at points. And, I am leaning with Omar to actually get like a second or third round TKO in this fight. So I do think the betting line's off. As I said, I think it should be minus 233 to Omar at least, which is a 70% indication. At the moment, they're giving us minus 175, which is only a 63% indication. So at the very least, I'm saying we've got a 6 to 7% edge on the bookies. And if you've got a 6 to 7% edge on the bookies, you need to bet it. Now, where I line this fight, I actually line Omar about 75%, right? So minimum 70, but I actually give him about a 75% chance of winning this fight, right? Maybe just under 75, maybe like 73, 74. So in regards to that, that means I think we've got a 10% edge on the bookies here, which is a huge edge, right? We don't often have a 10% edge on the bookies. Now, I do think I actually do get quite a lot of edge on bookies quite regularly, right? But 10% is a very solid edge, right? And we're not only getting a 10% edge on the bookies, but we're also getting a 10% edge on the bookies, in my opinion, on a line which is likely to happen, right? So I think this fight is Omar's to win, and I think Omar's going to win this fight about 75% of the time. So we've got a 10% edge on the bookies for an event that I think is going to happen about 75% of the time, right? So more often than not, quite a bit more often than not, 3 times out of 4, it's going to happen, and we're getting a 10% edge. So, I mean, them two factors combined, it's a pretty solid bet in my opinion. So Omar Morales, I think he's going to defeat Shane Young if this fight stays on the card, and I think he's going to do it by TKO in round 2, and that's my final prediction. And the next thing we're going to be talking about is the final segment on the podcast, which is the main event. I mean, there's not too much to talk about in this, but I'm sure that I'll have a lot to talk about for this fight, right? Aka in the chat, thanks for being in here, man. He's saying, is this the first breakdown? I'm late. No, it's not the first breakdown. We've already gone over the most exciting fight on the card, which was Thomas Almeida versus Sean O'Malley, and the most inaccurate line, which is that one. That's the second breakdown. The last breakdown is the main event, which is Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou, the rematch. What a huge rematch we have here. We've got the scariest man in all of UFC, Francis Ngannou, versus the nicest man in all of UFC, Stipe Miocic, who actually beat the scariest man, a few years ago. I don't exactly know when that fight was. How long do you think it's been? Like, it's been, at least 3 years, right? I'll bring up Stipe's record here and we'll actually see how long it was since the last two fought. But I'll also bring up their France's record, because France's record since this fight is pretty hilarious. I think he's fought like 4 times and he's been in the cage like 2 minutes. If you're forgetting that Derek Lewis fight, which everyone has to forget because it was a pretty depressing fight, right? Often billed as the worst fight of all time, Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. But, you know, that was after Francis Ngannou lost to Stipe, and he said he was gun shy because he was kind of scared of what happened in that Stipe fight. He's scared of it happening again. And it kind of showed, you know. I do actually tend to believe him here because it kind of showed. But look, he fought Stipe Miocic in January 2018, right? So it's 3 years on now, 3 years and a couple of months on from that fight. And a lot's changed, you know. Their styles are basically the same, but a lot's changed in regards to Stipe ended up, you know, losing to Daniel Cormier after that. He got knocked out unconscious for the first time in his career. Then he came back and beat DC. Then he came back and beat DC again. And now he's taking on Stipe Miocic again. Whereas Francis Ngannou, he's had a completely different career after that fight. He's fought 5 times and 5 different people. He fought Derek Lewis, but as I say, that was such a weird fight. I'm not going to talk too much about that. After that, he fought Curtis Blades, knocked him out in 45 seconds. Then he fought Cain Velasquez, welcomed Cain Velasquez back to a 26-second knockout. Then he fought Junior Dos Santos, knocked him out in 71 seconds. And then he fought Jairzinho last fight, and he knocked him out in 20 seconds. So, I mean, pretty crazy, isn't it? Like Francis Ngannou's record since the Derek Lewis fight, let's say. So I'm just going to work this out, right? So he had 45 seconds in the octagon against Curtis Blades. Then he had 26 seconds against Cain Velasquez. So that's what? You can do it. You can work out along with me if you're good at maths. That's 1 minute and 11, right? I believe. Yeah, 1 minute, 11 seconds. And then his next fight, ironically, was 1 minute and 11 seconds. So that's 2 minutes and 22 seconds. And then he fought Jairzinho. So that's and that fight went on for 20 seconds. So that means 2 minutes and 21 seconds, did I say? 2 minutes and 22 seconds, plus the 20 seconds he was in the octagon with Jairzinho. That's 2 minutes and 42 seconds he's been in the octagon for after or since the Derek Lewis fight, which is crazy, right? He's fought 4 fights, and the whole time, the added up total, the time he's been in the octagon during them fights is 2 minutes and 42 seconds. So, you know, look, this fight is pretty simple, guys. If Francis doesn't knock him out early in the first 7.5 minutes, that first 1.5 rounds, it's highly likely Stipe is going to either cruise to a decision or get a late finish, right? It's highly likely. Now, I just do want to say before I forget that Stipe decision is currently sitting at like plus 400, plus 500. Now, I think that line is completely off, seeing as it happened the first time. So I don't know how you're saying, you know, it's got less than a 20% chance of happening when it literally happened the first time. Now, obviously, just because it happened the first time doesn't mean it's going to happen again, because we only saw one iteration of that fight, right? If them guys fought 100 times, Stipe's not going to win by decision 100 times, right? He's probably not even going to win by decision 50 times, right? But is he going to win by decision less than 20 times? Is he going to win by decision less than 15 times? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he wins 25% of the time by decision. So I do think Stipe to win via decision at plus 500 or whatever it is right now there's value on that line. So if you do want to have a bet, that's not a terrible bet. But Francis is dangerous, man, and Francis could definitely turn Stipe's lights off, you know, within a couple minutes, even within a couple of seconds, you know, because we've seen him do it before. Really, if Ngannou touches Stipe on the chin once, Stipe could go out. Now, in their first fight, Stipe did take a couple of punches off Ngannou. He didn't duck them all. He wasn't avoiding them all. He did take a few punches, but it doesn't mean just because he's took a couple of punches off Francis and took them before, he's going to be able to take him this time. We know Francis can put anybody's lights out. And I will say that Stipe Miocic has been in a couple of wars since that fight. You know, the Francis Ngannou fight was a war. The first Daniel Cormier fight, he got knocked unconscious for the first time in his career. That will take something out of you being knocked unconscious, especially for the first time in your career. Now, he weathered the storm in the second fight. He came back against Cormier and he won that fight via 4th-round TKO. But he still took a lot of punishment in that fight, right? And the last fight Stipe had was a 5-round decision win over Daniel Cormier, which, he largely dominated, but he really did take some punishment in that fight. Cormier was landing. So Stipe's took a lot of punishment since that fight. Now, if you go on the side of Francis Ngannou, even in that Derek Lewis fight, he didn't take hardly any punishment. So Francis took like no punishment since that fight, right? And Stipe's took a lot of punishment, man, just in them Cormier fights, because that's all his fault. So we do have to take that into consideration, that Stipe has took a lot of punishment, and that can affect you, in your upcoming fights, and especially if you're fighting someone with the punching power of Francis Ngannou, where he can just turn your lights off. So, look, it's a dangerous fight for Stipe, but it's a dangerous fight for Ngannou because Stipe's been the only one to absolutely nullify Francis Ngannou. Now, Derek Lewis definitely did it, but usually I just say that, styles make fights and, I take fights how I see them. But with the Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou fight, I do think we can call that an anomaly. And I do think we can say that we can't take too much from that fight when we're watching a Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou fight. Look, I rarely say this, right? I rarely say this. I'm a sports bettor. And as I said, we want to make as little assumptions as possible, right? So I don't want to assume that Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis fight didn't mean anything. But I'm going to say that it was such a weird anomaly fight that we've never seen anything like that happen before in Francis fights. I think we can kind of just chalk that one down to some PTSD that Stipe gave him only 6 months earlier, Anyway, I do think there's arguments say that Derek Lewis has a lot of power, so Francis didn't want to get hit by that power, and he hasn't fought anyone with that power since, although he did fight Jairzinho, but I don't think Jairzinho has got the level of power or the level of oomph as Derek. It's not a very technical way of putting it down, but I'll get off that Derek Lewis and Ngannou fight now. But what I'm trying to say is that, Stipe's took a lot of shots, and I've just got a feeling that Stipe might not be able to take the shots he did in the first fight because he is going to get caught, guys. We're not going to come out here and say that Francis Ngannou will not catch Stipe because Francis Ngannou caught Stipe in his first fight, and he's caught every single person he's fought, apart from maybe Lewis, So he's going to catch Stipe, right? Is Stipe going to be able to take it? Maybe not, right? So you're banking on Stipe to take it. Now, if you are banking on Stipe to take it and he does take it in that first round, I think Francis Ngannou's chances half. If he makes it out the first round, his chances of winning probably half. And if Stipe makes it out of the second round, I think Francis Ngannou maybe has like a 10% chance of winning that fight. I really don't see Francis stopping Stipe or winning the decision if the fight gets out of the second round. But for them first 7 minutes, I do think he's very, very dangerous. For the first 3 minutes in the first fight, he was dangerous. After the 3 minutes, Ngannou was basically useless. He did catch him towards the end of that first round. If you watch the Stipe and Ngannou first fight, he did catch him towards the end. But after 2 minutes, Francis was gassed. I do think because Francis has gone 5 rounds now against Stipe, against the same fighter he's coming up against this Saturday, he is going to be able to, maybe preserve himself a little bit better, or at least be, aware as to, what's in store if he does not get Stipe out of there early. So I do expect him to be able to use his cardio better. Now, I can't assume that his takedown defense has got better. I can't even assume that his cardio has got better. But what I can assume is that his fight IQ has got better because he's been in there for 5 rounds now, right? And then another 3 rounds against Derek Lewis. So, that's like the fight against Stipe and the fight against Derek Lewis totals 8 rounds altogether, right? If you calculate all his other fights, they probably don't even come up to 4 rounds, guys, So I do think he took a lot out of that Stipe fight, and I do think he took a lot out of that Derek Lewis fight. So I do expect him to use his tools better, but we can't discredit Stipe. He was able to do it once, and he might be able to do it again. The betting line currently has Stipe an underdog, right? Stipe is about a plus 100, an even money underdog. And Francis Ngannou is sitting at about a minus 125 now. Now, in regards to any value on the line, this is a weird fight for me because I feel like this is a fight similar to last week, right? Which was Kevin Holland versus Derek Brunson. That was the main event. And I put out a tweet before the fight. You can check my Twitter. And I basically said that I think Derek Brunson has got the tools to win this fight. I think if you're betting it, you should be betting Derek Brunson because there's value on the line there. But I just have a feeling Kevin Holland's going to win, right? I didn't bet it because I can't bet feelings. You know, I'm not an emotional bettor. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a good bettor, right? You can't bring emotions into it. So I had a feeling Kevin was going to win, but I didn't bet it. But that feeling may have kept me off Brunson when I did think there was value on Brunson's line, right? As the underdog with the wrestling path. So I feel like this fight might be similar, but it doesn't mean it's going to play out the same way. So I think this fight is similar in regards to, I think there's value on Stipe's line at the plus 100 underdog, because how are you betting on a fighter to be underdog who's more proven? He's fought the better competition. He's fought the competition more in their prime. You know, for example, when Stipe fought Alistair Overeem, he was more in his prime than when Ngannou fought him. When Stipe fought Junior Dos Santos twice, he was more in his prime than when Ngannou fought him. Stipe has fought the better level competition, and obviously he's beat Francis Ngannou, right? So that's the biggest thing, right? He's already won this fight. So I do think there's value on Stipe's line, but I just have a feeling Francis is going to catch him. Now, is it going to be one of them things where, like last week, where I thought Holland was going to catch him and it just never came? It could be. It definitely could be. I just think that Stipe is going to get hit like he got hit in the first round in the last fight. And I think he's going to go unconscious this time. I think he's going to go unconscious because I think Francis is going to be able to land the shots that he needs to. And I think that because of the punishment Stipe's took, he's going to go unconscious. And I just also believe that Francis put every single person out he's landed on. I don't know how Stipe ate them shots last time. And I think if they fight 100 times on that date that they fought 3 years ago, Francis still knocks him out probably about half them times if Stipe eats them shots. You know, chins are a weird thing. Eating shots is a weird thing. You'd never thought that DC would be able to one-punch Stipe, but then Ngannou wouldn't. When Ngannou caught Stipe with more than one punch, right? You wouldn't have thought that. But chins are a weird thing. Some fighters just take shots, you know, against a heavy puncher, and when they fight a lighter puncher, they just take one clean shot on the side of the head or on a weird place of their body, or they're not looking, and they get knocked out by the puncher who's actually weaker than another puncher who couldn't knock them out. So chins are a weird thing. So just because he took the punches the first time, I not necessarily think he's going to be able to take it this time, and I don't think he's going to be able to take it this time, and I do think he's going to get knocked out. And I am predicting Francis Ngannou to get a first-round knockout against Stipe Miocic and win the fight. It's painful for me to say that as a bettor because, you know, you as a sports bettor or MMA bettor, you kind of want to value the person who can win minutes as opposed to the person who's got, you know, the path to victory, which is a one-punch knockout, you know, or a first-round KO. If you guys know AJ Shulo, he's a guy I respect in the MMA betting game, and he put out an article about a month ago, and he basically said that, you know, when you're betting on MMA, you should basically value the guy who can win minutes as opposed to the guy who's just got one round to win, right? And so it hurts me to say I think Ngannou's going to knock him out, but I just think Ngannou's going to knock him out. And I could be getting caught up with the hype here, guys, you know, and I probably am, you know, the Ngannou hype, but we've seen him wipe people out so much. Why is he not going to be able to wipe Stipe out? You know, like, why? Because Stipe's a better fighter than everyone he's fought? Yeah, I do believe he is. Stipe's got better boxing defense than everyone he's fought? Yeah, I do believe he does. Is Stipe good enough to just not get touched at all by Ngannou? No, I don't think he is. He got touched in the first round of their first fight, and he's going to get touched again. And I won't spend too much longer on this breakdown. In fact, I won't spend any longer. I'm done on it. I'm kind of going around in circles, but that is my prediction. Francis Ngannou to get a first-round knockout, even though it hates me. Even though it pains me to say that and to go against my guy Stipe, who is the better all-round complete MMA fighter for sure. And I don't think anyone would argue about that, even Francis bettors. Now, in regards to value on any lines, I already mentioned Stipe decision at plus 500 is value. And I'm going to mention Francis Ngannou in round one at plus 250 is value. Okay, Francis Ngannou in round one at plus 250, that's value. Okay. Francis Ngannou round two, if you want to play that, you know, it's plus 600. That's a little better value, but I think if he's going to get a knockout, probably in the first round. If Stipe gets out of that first round, it's highly likely Stipe wins the fight. So, you know, you could play the Stipe money line and then the Francis round one. You probably will profit if you do that, but that's all I got to say about the fight, guys. I mean, it's a great fight. I can't wait for it. And I hope it's going to be a great fight. I hope it will live up to what it is billed as. And I believe it will, right? Hamster Cat Lion, thanks for being here in the chat. Hamster Cat Lion is saying Stipe by decision. I hope you're betting that, because that's like plus 500. So, I mean, you make a lot of money. You'd be a rich man if he does win by decision and if you bet it. Bleed is in the chat saying, I think Francis catches him this time. Yeah, so do I, man. So do I. Are we getting caught up in the hype, the Francis hype? Mate, he knocks everyone out, apart from Stipe and Lewis. So, I mean, even if we are getting caught up in the hype, there's hype for a reason. So, and shout out to Bleed. I know Bleed. He's got his own show. I respect Bleed in the MMA community. Anybody who's listening here or is listening after, go and check out Bleed. I haven't spoken to him too much, but I definitely keep an eye on his show. And shout out to Bleed, man. Someone I respect. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. So that's it, guys. Anyone else in the chat got anything to say? Hit me up. If not, I'm going to get out of here. And yeah, man. So I'll just go over one more time. The most exciting fight I broke down, which was Thomas Almeida versus Sean O'Malley. And I predicted O'Malley to get a first-round TKO there. Am I getting caught up in the hype again? Like Ngannou? Maybe. The most inaccurate line on the betting card. Omar Morales at minus 175 to defeat Shane Young. I think that should be minus 233 in my opinion. Actually, I think it should be like minus 270. But minus 233 is a minimum at the 70% implied probability. And the main event, Miocic and Ngannou. I don't need to go over that again. I've already said that. I'm predicting Ngannou to get a first-round knockout. So, and I'm predicting Omar Morales to defeat Shane Young in round 2 via TKO. So I'm predicting all finishes in these 3 fights. And, just like Bleed, I think it's going to be a violent, I think a lot of people are going to bleed this card. That didn't really work out well, that analogy there. But I think it's going to be a violent card, I think it's going to be a good card. We've got a couple of cancellations, but I still think it's going to be a solid card like last week. And that's it, guys. For those of you who want to check out my website, you can check out my results. You can sign up for membership packages. We're 2 years profitable now, and we're going to continue profitable. We're profitable this year. We're up 19 units at the moment, and going to keep pushing on and trying to beat last year's mark. Last year, we won 60 units on the year. I'm very happy with that number, but always trying to beat it. So we're going for 70 this year. That's it, guys. LucrativeMMABetting.com. I'll be out in a couple of days with some more videos, and that's it. I might do my preliminary card breakdown like I do some weeks. So check out my YouTube channel for that if you want to see me break down the whole preliminary card. And until then, thanks for listening to the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast, and I will be releasing one next week.